Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blues Talk. Again, John, Dave, myself, going to look back over Ireland's pretty disappointing performance up in Paris. Look back at all the other Six Nations matches, our game against Ebre at the weekend, the other Pro 12 stuff, and look forward to the Pro 12 game against Cardiff at the weekend. So, boys, 10-9 against France. Disappointing?
Yeah, it was disappointing. I mean, it started out quite well. We were relatively dominant, if dominant is the right word, I don't know if it is, but we were certainly on top.
Yeah.
For the first certainly half. We could never get that. We could never get daylight. We got 6-0, 6-3, 9-3.
Various reasons for that.
We could never get that extra score. Well, there were a number of reasons for it. We'll go into those later, but just in terms of the if you like the talking points of the game, the fact that we could never get that second score, that third score away from them.
Mm-hmm.
There were
we actually did, but it was disallowed.
Yeah, well, there were reasons
unjustly.
For that. If you let me finish. Reasons for that. The reason for that were a pretty poor refereeing performance from Jacko Paper, and a certain amount of roughhousing, shall we say, from the French. Ironic considering the amount of bitching they did about Sean O'Brien in the World Cup. But the thing is, at the end of the day, you can't control the ref, you can't control the opposition, you can control yourselves though. And I'm not sure that we did. I mean, when they went 10-9 up, heads were lost. I mean, there was a fancy dropout tried instead of just, either kicking long and meaning they kicked back and you had possession, or kicking a contestable. We didn't. There was the fancy pants kick was tried and it failed, and it went straight out of touch. We were back under the cosh.
On a scrum.
Yeah, we were
worst
back,
of
yeah.
all,
Well, we just conceded.
Yeah.
Like psychologically, it's just going to rip the heart from you. Yeah, I mean,
you got to. I mean, that's the one thing that Sexton has that we don't know about Jackson, but I don't think Madigan. I think it's fair to say Madigan cannot control a match now. I just think he can't. He doesn't know how to. He doesn't know how to if you like to as Jerry Thorney would say, he doesn't know how to gauge the psychic ebb and flow.
I thought it was. I watched the match on RTE, and it was very telling to see Ronan O'Gara's. Well, remember his display, a number of times he's been for Munster and Ireland, but particularly in 2009 with the Grand Slam, when he was the one who stepped up and, he said, like, 10 minutes in a game is a huge amount of time. You don't lose the head. You get back into position and you do the simple things. Mm-hmm. But, like, we tried to go for the $1 million play and it didn't work.
I know exactly what Ronan O'Gara would, and indeed Johnny Sexton would have done in that play. They would have kicked long and presented France with an opportunity to click here from deep inside their 22 and a poor angle. And then we would have, got the ball back, maybe halfway, maybe a bit closer, but we would have had the ball back, and that's the important thing. Yeah. Because you can't score points if you don't have the ball.
True. Well,
another disappointing second half performance.
Yeah.
I feel like a broken record saying it again. No points scored in the second half, and you ain't going to win a game if you're not scoring in the second half. And that just leads me to question: is there fitness level problems? Or I don't know. I don't know.
A few things had an impact on our fitness. One, we lost a lot of our subs early on.
Yeah.
So, that's the biggest one. And we saw it with Toulon in Aviva Stadium, where they just overpowered us in the end from having fresh guys that they could bring on that were big battering. I thought he was mad when I saw Antonio and the other lad starting, and they left Benarous and Slimani on the bench. I thought he was insane. I didn't think it was a good idea. But they more than kind of held their own, the starter guys. Antonio, with the size of him, is never going to last more than 60 minutes. But those two guys coming on fresh just tore the skin out of us,
Yeah.
And
it reminded me of the match against Toulouse I think it was the semi-final in 2010.
Yeah, yeah, we had nothing on the bench.
We had nothing on the bench, and through a combination of injuries and probably
exactly, yeah,
the team hadn't fully developed into the winning the 2 Heinekens next year.
Well, the big thing for me, right, is first the disallowed try, and then the 2 possible card incidents.
Why we talk about them? Like, the referee was directly behind their
when
second
Sexton
row.
got lashed out of it.
I mean, he was literally 2 yards away from the incident, and he just seemed to
shrugged it
off and ran to the
Didn't
play.
even look at it. Didn't even go back and look.
I think we've got a classic case of double bubble with Jacko Paper. Double bubble is where you get 2 days news out of one story. The classic one is vicar in three-in-a-bed sex romp, and then the next day you can run a story where the vicar denies the three-in-a-bed sex romp. After England-Fiji in the World Cup, all the papers, every rugby media was all about how Jack O'Paper overused the TMO. Too much TMO.
Paper.
Yeah. And now, this case on Sunday, all the English papers, surprisingly, not the Irish ones, surprisingly the English papers were all about Jack O'Paper didn't use enough of the TMO.
Yeah.
So double bubble's normally quicker than that, but this was playing the long game.
I know, but it's not a case of comparing one game to the other. It should be doing each particular thing on merits. And if he needs to go to the TMO 10 times, so be it.
I didn't think he overused the TMO in that England-Fiji game as it happens. I think you use it where you have to use it because it's there for you.
It had changed the protocol.
But he got absolutely lashed out of it for doing so, and maybe he didn't want another backlash.
Well, fair enough.
That's a human failing that we're all guilty of.
You know, he makes a big song and dance, and he pulls Sexton down to talk to him, and his only administration was standards, rugby ethics or rugby standards, rather than, do you know what I mean? Like, if someone says that to you, you nearly laugh at them and say, "Geez, I got away with that."
Mm. Well.
And that's why
it reminded me.
If I can go and shove their playmaker in the back and put him off his game like that, and nothing was said with the referee looking at me, what else can we get away with? And look what happened to Dave Carney. I mean, your man came through like a torpedo.
Yeah, that was sickening looking at that impact. Like he really, really caught him, and he caught him high. Was that the one that they said was just short of a red card?
Yeah,
I think it was. Like, it reminded me of Dave Carney incident for Leinster against Wasps. Now, that was in about the 3rd minute of the game,
Johnson,
right?
Was it?
Ashley Johnson tore him out of it. Now, he got a yellow card. 10 minutes later, he's back on the pitch and finishes the game for Wasps. Dave Carney was out. He missed the feckin' Six Nations, and we were without Dave Carney for the whole game. Okay, we weren't down a man. This guy gets cited afterwards and banned. That's no good to us.
So in the last 4 years,
that should have been a yellow card.
Dave Carney has been dropped on his head, kicked in the head, and torpedo tackled. And what was a 2-week ban in total for all those things? Dave Carney must have really pissed off somebody in World Rugby.
He needs Dylan Hardy to have a go with him, Dave.
Did he shag Brett Gosper's wife or something? I don't know.
He refused to, I heard. But anyway. Dave Carney getting lashed out of it like that, and Sexton getting lashed out of it. If the Carney one was just short of a red card, what does that mean? It was a yellow card.
Yeah.
So we would have undoubtedly, we're so close to scoring anyway, we would have undoubtedly scored a bloody try or something.
Well, we would have a penalty there.
Yeah. And it was a kickable penalty too. So,
but
that's the winning of the game.
So that
Sexton, the same thing. That could easily have been a yellow.
Exactly. But
then the disallowed try,
but then,
which was a try.
Exactly. And one hit him on the chest, and one hit him in the head. Another one hit the player on the head.
There was another run, hit Trimble.
But of course, it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, our Ireland rugby seems to be operating, for some reason in the last year or two, has descended into this binary state where everything's either ultra brilliant and everyone's at the top of the ground, or is incredibly shite. I mean, it's Irish rugby seems to be suffering from some kind of, and I mean,
I don't think it's
provincial
just Irish
national
rugby.
team, some kind of manic
I know,
state.
but I was listening off the ball before I came here tonight, and that blouse Joe Malloy was on, and he was just having a complete hysterical.
I don't even know who is that guy.
He's the new presenter.
All right.
We just had a complete hissy fit about Irish rugby and the state of it, and oh my God, the wheels are falling off. What's everyone going to do?
The sky is falling.
And it's just like, relax. We lost a game against France by a point. Not a very good team in France, admittedly.
No,
but
that's the frustrating part.
But if you look at the Irish team, I mean, there's wholesale changes from the team that we put out against France 4 years ago.
Totally.
We don't have the strength and depth that they have in other countries.
In anywhere.
And, between...
I don't think, actually, in terms of strength and depth...
It's the best we've ever had.
I would be very surprised if France
not.
could be as competitive as we were, if they were down the amount of players we were down. I don't think France would have been able to compete.
There was a very interesting...
I mean, we do have... The thing is, in a way, just to disagree with you, we do have strength in depth. We saw it by the fact we were able to put out a competitive rugby team despite all the absences we had.
Okay, that's a fair point.
It's better than it's ever been, but it's still not
But what I mean
ideal.
is that we were only a couple of minutes ago talking about bringing off monsters from the bench. We weren't really able to do that, Dave, because we're kind of down to not having them in the team.
But you decided that
between injuries and retirements.
Well, you see, that's it. You see, we were in a situation because they weren't available. It's not that they're not there. If they weren't there, there would be a real problem. And if the 15 that took the pitch was our best 15, and the guys on the bench, like where we were calling up Fergus McFadden, that last thing on a Friday night kind of thing. If that was where we were, that'd be then we would have a problem. But it's not. I mean, we had Cian Healy, for example, was playing his way back to fitness for Leinster.
Yeah.
So was
Ross.
So was Ross. There were guys who weren't available. Marty Moore's not available. Ian Henderson isn't available. Sean O'Brien went off injured. Peter O'Mahony's unavailable. I mean, there is depth. The thing is, the problem is that we're actually at the bottom of the pool at the moment because of the injuries. But I don't think that I don't think that France, for example, if you took maybe how many guys, 10?
Depends on what position.
Team, would they be able to compete as well? I don't know.
They've a clatter of those big cart horse second rows.
They do, yeah.
They've a clatter of lots of, probably a clatter of props. They don't have number 10s coming out of their ears, though, Nobody does, really.
Questions do we?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Nobody does.
But one thing is, we seem to be shipping an awful lot of injuries. Like we've got another dose of them there. O'Brien's out. Jared Payne apparently played through the pain barrier. Obviously, Sexton looks like he's
through the pain barrier.
Dave Carney this time as well went off. Looks like he's out for a while. So it's starting now, and then obviously we had Earls, Zebo, Luke Fitzgerald were out from the first match.
It's pretty calamitous, all right. But it was a very interesting interview. You probably heard it on Friday night with Philippe Saint-André and Bod on News Talk, where Saint-André was basically explaining the state of French rugby and how it works and how you don't get the players, you don't have them for any time, you don't, and this is why they don't have a competitive team anymore, why they don't have the depth that they had. Now, they may well come back under Novez. Novez may sprinkle some fairy dust on them, I don't know. But the interesting things he was saying was that they don't have the fitness, and the main reason they don't have the fitness is because they can't play that high tempo game in the top 14 because it goes on for nearly 11 months of the year. So they just can't play at that level. They have to have less ball in play time. Typically it's less than half of the time is ball in play. Like anything over 40 minutes is huge ball in play time for a rugby match, and the top 14 has less than that, in the 30s, low 30s is where their games are at. So when a team takes them, as Eddie would say, to the woodshed and really goes at their fitness, they'll usually, if you have the team fit enough and you have the bench good enough to last long enough to do it. But
there's also psychological and attitudinal issues in French rugby, though. You look at the French papers on Sunday and Monday, and it was like they'd won the World Cup. Instead of
even after the game, did you see the players jumping around,
squeaking through against an injury-ravaged Ireland with the help of an extraordinarily incompetent refereeing performance? I mean, that's the realpolitik of it. And if France think that makes them anything,
all that in a bag of,
then they're in significant trouble. And I said it before. I said, and I still see no reason to change my mind that that last World Cup or the next World Cup could well be the last time we see France at the World Cup as a Tier 1 nation. I still see no reason to change my mind on that.
Well, if you look at every other facet of the play, France did beat us. They beat us in offloads. They beat us in meters gained. They beat us in line breaks. Like, they did play better than us. Now, friends of mine were over there, and he said you can't get over how wet it was. Didn't come across
on the telly,
quite as torrential as it was in reality.
But it got worse during the second half, and that's where those guys coming on, the two big fit props coming on.
I think John, you made the point. We had to empty our bench, or certainly bring on a large number of them early days, rather than bringing them on after 50 or 60 minutes. And that was crucial. And like, as the game wore on, we didn't score from impact. We didn't score from the 38th minute. Like that.
We didn't have the ability to make a huge difference off our bench.
Exactly. No impact.
In terms of the front row.
But even still, like, when say one of your top three players, say Sean O'Brien, has to go off after 20 minutes, let alone you don't have his experience, strength and skill,
but you've no back row impact,
but you don't have anyone to make any difference
with
20 minutes to go.
You're looking at a situation where
for McCarthy, same thing,
20 minutes to go, you're looking to bring on maybe Donnacha Ryan, bring on O'Donnell to take the pace up, to attack, as you said, suspect French fitness, and those guys aren't there. because they've already been, they're already on the pitch doing their thing, you know. So that's a big issue. That's the issue that I mean, for all the things you were saying about where the areas French were on top, it didn't actually do them any good, you know. Does anyone think that game wasn't decided by the referee?
No, to be fair, I don't think on this program we go on, or podcast or whatever we want to call it, we go on too much about referees generally. Who aren't called Fitzgibbon. No, but we generally don't start whinging about refs, win, lose or draw. But this particular one, and I don't really like whinging about refs either. You know, it's not a good look because it's hard to get a guy to, you know, to get people of the right standard to ref a game.
Struck me
but it's very frustrating.
Nigel Owens was on the side.
And he didn't step in either.
Well, you see, the whole thing is about Nigel is, don't forget, the world revolves around Nigel, and he isn't really going to go. He isn't, of course not. But is he really going to step in and make it big?
Well, you don't know what the thing is.
But my point being, though, that you've got one of the best, the guy who did the World Cup final, one of the best referees currently. Like, referees probably have a career of, you know, like a player, probably somewhere between 10 and 12 or 15 years. Use him when he's there. Like, he's going to be gone in 3 or 4 seasons' time. Use him while he's there. There's no point in having him running a touchline.
Oh, yeah. Well, now, I don't know, but I do know that a referee will tell his team of officials what he expects from them and how he expects them to operate with him. For all we know, Paper could be one of those guys who says to his, I don't want to hear from you unless I ask. Some referees are like that. They don't want to hear from their touch judges unless they ask for an opinion. Now, I don't know, but I'm saying you could have a situation where you could be one of those guys. Some guys are like that.
If someone sees foul play, they put the flag out.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, regardless of... So, whether Nigel didn't see it or didn't bother...
Well, in fairness, Nigel, if it was the Sexton one you're talking about, you know, anybody could...
But the referee was 3 yards behind.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, there's the referee.
You're hardly going to put up your flag in the touchline when you see the ref is right... It happens right in front of him, you know.
So. I'm uncomfortable in a situation... I'm uncomfortable saying what I said in that...
Unless it's about Peter Fitzgibbon.
Unless it's about Peter Fitzgibbon. Or maybe George Clancy. Unless... I'm uncomfortable saying that a referee decided the match. Because generally that's not what happens. And even to a certain extent, even Ireland could have dug their own way out of this hole without...
They could.
But didn't.
But the crucial thing was not scoring when we had the players early on.
Ivor Garrity asked a very good question. This is a live point. He asks, where did John get his hair done? No, he asks,
why didn't John get his hair done?
Is there any real leadership on the field in the Irish team? Too many generals, but no one iconic leader. Now, I would have said that was something that did strike me after the match, and it's something I don't like to say because he's a player I admire immensely. He's one of my favourite players in the Irish team. I didn't hear a word from him.
From Best?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard one to, you know, you didn't hear too much in the ref mic, but...
Yeah, well, that's true.
Would he have been...
He was asked about it. And he kind of said, well, there's a thin line between being a pain in the arse and getting your point across. But like, at least get to the line.
Would Paul O'Connell have...
Well,
he never worried about it.
I can remember O'Driscoll running in, having arguments with referees, and the guy kind of very politely says, Brian, please go back into the centre.
I remember Brian O'Driscoll threatening to take the team off the pitch. Remember that in the European match against Edinburgh, because the referee got injured and the touch judge wasn't qualified to referee at European level. He was qualified to referee at league level. Right. And O'Driscoll said, well, we're not carrying on. I want to see somebody from the ERC.
Really?
Yeah, you could hear it all over the ref mic. Eventually he was calmed down. But I remember when Cian Healy got stood on that time against Munster, and Paul O'Connell was trying everything to get Cian Healy sent off.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, but that's, you know, to a certain extent, much as it's, you know, snidery, you still have to do it if you're a captain. You have to protect your guys. That's your job. Your job is to protect your guys, especially if the foul play isn't imagined, if it's real. And in this case, it was real. And I was disappointed that I didn't hear from Best.
Well,
don't forget, it was one of the issues that did come up when candidates were being proposed for the captaincy, was that generally the captain should be on the pitch for the 80 minutes. Best was substituted because it's the norm now for the front row to be subbed off at some stage with 15 or so 20 minutes to go. He was brought off, but you know, Sexton was off the pitch at that stage too, probably, or he certainly was off for the last 10 minutes. You know, so you've got your two leaders on that are obviously Heaslip has captained Ireland before, so you would have expected him to step up.
Yeah. You see,
O'Brien was
there's
gone.
a lot of senior guys.
Another candidate, as we,
Yeah.
you know.
There's a lot of senior guys on that team. In fairness, I mean, not to put the blame on Best, a lot of senior guys in that team who didn't say a whole lot else themselves.
Murray, Sexton, guys like that.
Yeah.
Well, O'Brien was off early. There's, who else is there? There's a lot of mid-range guys there, mid-ranking guys, but nobody who's like.
Say, for instance, the two cent.
Guyver
Well,
is saying.
Rob Carney, he's 80 odd caps, and
You got two locks there who've got a lot of caps as well.
Hmm.
You got two out of the back row, starting back row, would be heavily capped individuals, and one of them, the third of them, has captained his province quite regularly.
Would you see Devon Toner or Mike McCarthy as captain material though?
I'd say Devon Toner, perhaps. All right, maybe not Mike McCarthy. I don't know if he's.
I don't think they have that type of personality. I mean,
Possibly
they're
not.
fabulous players, but I don't think they're that kind of personality of a captain.
Yeah, I don't know.
Then again,
Devon Toner's captain.
I never played with
He's
them.
done quite well, but I wouldn't put him in charge of Ireland. Not by any means. But in terms of being a leader on the pitch and talking to a referee in an appropriate manner.
He's just coming to terms with probably running the line out, Dave.
Yeah, well,
so
that's
at that
true,
stage, just let him.
But it seems our guys are getting creamed out there. Somebody has to do something. Whether it's well, now it could well be that Ireland are seen as a soft touch.
Well,
Don't complain enough.
Yeah, it's happened in a couple of games on the bounce now. It might be time to go out against England and throw a few elbows. It happens sometimes. So every player has to do something.
You know what'll happen? We'll get pulled for it.
Yeah, well, every player, every so often you have to do something that reminds people that. It's Johnny Giles used to say at least once every 2 years he used to deliberately go over the top of a ball and do an opposing figure, an opposing player, just to remind everyone else to stay away from, and that's how he earned the right to play. Sometimes you have to do that.
Well, I think our role in the Six Nations now is going to possibly be slam stoppers against England. Going back
before,
to
John?
2001 with Keith Wood going over in the corner to stop their slam.
Well, we'll talk about that match.
It's set up for them. I said it last week. It's set up for
We've
England.
one question just in terms of one thing we were talking about earlier is the World Cup rankings are coming up next year to be decided. And Dara Faulkner asks, in 6 months' time, Ireland has. Well, wouldn't you? But he says, in 6 months' time, Ireland has free falled from 2nd to 8th in the world rankings. When do we start describing this as a crisis? I wouldn't describe it as free fall. I mean, you can move up and down pretty quickly. I mean, we beat England, we beat Scotland.
They've lost 2 matches.
Yeah.
2 matches and drew 1 that they've won.
Yeah. You can lose points very quickly, and you can gain. But you
It
can gain
depends
them
on
back
who you're
just
playing.
quickly.
Yeah, it depends on who you're playing. You divide. They divide the scores.
We were talking earlier though about this, and we do have a fairly tough schedule over the next 12 or 18 months. We play the All Blacks,
but because those teams are ranked above us,
if we beat them, we'll
getting close to them gets big points.
Yeah.
So it's not the way the system is the way the coefficients work and the way it's weighted and stuff like that. It's actually not such a disaster having teams that are better than you playing them.
Well, it can be. If they beat you by more than 15, you lose your shirt.
Try not to get beaten by 15.
Well, obviously, but we've got to play South Africa 3 times in South Africa at the end of a long season that started with a World Cup. We're basically 13-month season or something like that. And then we've got New Zealand twice in the autumn.
Moving on to the other Six Nation games, Italy put up a brave enough display for first 15 minutes.
Shot themselves in the foot, and that was the all she wrote.
The England are the only team they haven't beaten in the Six Nations. They've beaten all the rest, and if they're ever
be thus.
If they're ever going to do it, they were going to do it in Rome. So it's going to be at least another 2 years before they have a hope of doing it. The England team, Eddie Jones, I think actually it's because of the EPS squad thing that Eddie Jones can't have wholesale changes. I mean, he's made a few.
Why would he want to make wholesale changes though?
I'm not saying he would, but
I mean, there's this whole thing. Everybody expected Eddie Jones to come in and make sweeping changes in the England team because England were in such trouble.
Just no more rugby league players, Dave.
But the thing is, over the last 2 years, England have played the same amount of games as us in the Six Nations, won the same amount of games as us in the Six Nations, and we've got 2 titles. So why would they? They weren't all that far off. Well,
they weren't, but they also had
a bad World Cup.
They had a very young team, and they didn't have perhaps in a World Cup you need a few more caps than they had. And that's probably what affected them at the crucial time. But their team is pretty kicking, and there wasn't much.
Beat the All Blacks.
A bit of jiggery pokery by Eddie, especially with their brains. by Eddie Jones, and they could easily walk away with a
I,
slam
I
here.
ne-
You know?
It's just that I never saw any need for wholesale changes. That people seem to think he was going to come in and wipe the decks. I never saw that happening.
Well, they've got us and Wales in Twickenham, and then they finish off with a possible Grand Slam game in Paris if they beat us in Wales. To me,
Those
the
are
Welsh.
two huge banana skins for them, though.
Well, I don't think the French one is. I think the
No,
hockey
I mean,
French.
before they get France, I mean,
Oh yeah.
Ireland and Wales are big
Well,
banana skins for them.
The Wales game is going to be a real needle match after the World Cup.
Mhm.
I just think England and Twickenham, you'd have to fancy them for it. Plus, they can get a slam if they beat us in Wales and then go to Paris for the slam. Whereas Wales can win the Six Nations if they beat England. I mean, if the Wales England for me is the decider on the slam, because I don't think France are going to win in Wales next week or 2 weeks time. So if Wales can beat England, I think they're shoe in for the title because their last game is in Italy. So presuming they beat France, then that's the big decider for the whole tournament for me anyway. Because we're certainly not going. Statistically, we need France and England to lose 2 games, Wales to lose at least 1, and us to run riot in our last 3 games. So, the games are hardly left that we can. We need Italy and Scotland to win a lot of games.
I don't think there's a whole lot of chance of us winning a championship this year.
No, but what we will surely be able to do is redeem our season after a disappointing match in Paris and getting a draw against Wales and Dublin.
I mean, we get 3 wins.
which is a dropped point, really, if you think of it. But if we win our last 3 games, the season is redeemed, takes the pressure off. I mean, again, people in the mainstream media talking about, like there was an article in the Irish Independent today by Roy Curtis, who said that people, Joe Schmidt's position is under pressure. Like,
You should stick to the basketball.
He's not case saying, writing these articles.
Well, sure, look who works for the Irish Independent. I mean, look.
I know who you're going to mention.
I mean, I'm not even going to mention his.
But at least he
his
has a pedigree.
feculent name.
At least he has a pedigree in rugby.
Yeah, so does dog food.
Well, anyway, so the other match, Wales were under a bit of pressure from Scotland, but just they had more class at the end.
Way more, yeah. Well, Wales are a bloody good team. We were saying the opening weekend they've got the best, most settled team in the championship, and it's them or England that's going to win it. Unless France is going to discover some miracle powder, I can't see them troubling the final day of the championship. But Wales are a very good team. They're not too bad with injuries at the moment, and they've got guys like Roberts and Davis
They're playing well.
who are playing well together. Roberts is having a great tournament so far. He's a guy who usually goes off injured at some point, or because he just puts himself through so much punishment.
Does he just run straight?
He does, and he tackles straight, and he does everything straight. He doesn't have a huge amount of finesse or ball handling ability, but by Jesus, he can do what he does. With extreme. He's a big, strong lad and all that, but he can really put himself about. It's not particularly subtle, but it's effective.
Wales are doing whatever Wales are doing. I mean, they've done the same thing since Warren took over. I mean, not much change, not even a huge amount of personnel changes, although there's been evolution rather than revolution.
But it seems to be able to beat everyone in the northern
yeah,
hemisphere
they know what they're
and
doing.
no one in the southern hemisphere.
Scotland, I don't know if they know where they're going.
They're improving though, Dave. I mean,
they're getting less bad. There's areas that I mean, I don't know.
They're flattering to deceive a bit.
I thought after Glasgow won the Pro 12 last year and had actually even before that did so well the year before.
Yeah.
I thought we'd see a real and then brought in a guy with a big reputation like Vern Cotter. I thought we'd see a real leap forward in Scottish results.
But there's
We've got some nice players.
Really.
But there's a world of a difference between the Six Nations and the Pro 12.
Of
Like
course.
we can't fool ourselves.
But they're not
they won
even
the
doing
Pro 12.
any better against Pro 12 nations. They're doing worse. They did worse last year against us. They're doing worse against Wales than they were previously, and that's the thing.
Well,
I
they
mean,
had
whatever,
nothing to
and
right.
Italy. I mean, they could lose to Italy.
The match last year was the last game of this season. We had to win by a ton. They had nothing to play for. Absolutely nothing to play. They had no motivation, and if you remember,
It showed.
It showed when I think O'Connell or O'Brien scored within the first few minutes, game over at that stage for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's fine and that one game. But I mean, it's every other game as well. That's the same thing, you know. I mean,
Well, to
are they
lose by 4 points against Wales in Cardiff, like,
Well, there was a late try that kind of.
yeah, but still.
It was 9 points.
I didn't. To be honest, I don't see much progression in Scotland. I mean, they've a lot of nice players.
Like
Tommy
George
Seymour,
North
really
scored a try that he
impressive.
shouldn't have been able to score.
No.
Like, he ran through him, no one tackled him. But the fact remains that if he hadn't got that try, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
John.
But you'll always get that try against Scotland. That's the thing.
Yeah, well, like I said, Tommy Seymour I really like. Maybe with a couple of years, Finn Russell will evolve a brain and be, you know, because he is a good player.
Yeah,
he's
but,
just lacking a little
Do
bit.
you remember
I know.
we mentioned it last
We
week
talked about
about
it last week.
the intercept that he took?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And there's they need to. Why don't they trust Pyrgos?
don't know.
I mean,
He's a bloody good player.
he's a
too.
good player. I mean, I've always been impressed with him when I've seen him play. But they never seem to trust him at all. Is he even in the
Yeah,
squad?
I was about to say, is he injured?
I don't know. There must be some reason. You know, and they still pick Blair Cowan. I
Got
mean,
lovely hair.
yeah, he has lovely hair, but that's about all he has. Unless there's some kind of envy thing going on with Vern Cotter, I don't know. But
Well, he is the illegitimate offspring of Cherry Blair and Brian Cowan.
Cowan, yeah.
So, you know,
well,
he's got some pictures of somebody naked that
he's
he's
very poor. He's from a country that's famous for its back rows.
yeah.
You know, he is very, very poor.
They could have. Well, he's been on the bench, hasn't he? Coming
Yeah.
on for Barkley
Yeah.
and stuff. But anyway, poor old Scotland and poor old Italy. Doesn't seem to be getting any easier for them.
Where do Italy play Scotland this year?
I think in Scotland.
Scotland might win.
Well, anyway,
Might.
turning our attention towards the Pro 12, Leinster got off to a fairly handy win against Zebra. 8 tries.
Yeah, 52 very handy points and 5 very handy match points. That, you know, at the end of the season when they're adding these things up, nobody's going to say, "Oh, we'll take half them away because you got them against Zebra during the Six Nations." They're
They have to do it for everyone else. That
they're as good as 52 points against anybody else. Having said that, it was a bit of a training run of a game, but it was great training run for guys like Adam Byrne, Keane Kelleher. Keane Kelleher showed a serious bit of pace. Something we're lacking is a bit of pace out wide, and there's a guy that could provide it. He really tore it up there through the centre of the pitch. I know they weren't the most interested looking team that he was running against, but
I think for me, I'll get it.
Ringrose got some more time under his belt, and
I was
a lot of the
impressed
younger
with
guys.
Ringrose and Byrne. I was impressed with a couple of guys. One thing I was not impressed with, and we say it every week, and that was a dreadful Zebra team.
Come
And
on.
did we make a single inch in any of our 5 or 6 attempts to maul in their 22? Did we?
No, I don't know. We need to reformat our mob.
Yeah, it's a disaster
We
at
need
this
to
stage.
wipe it and reinstall
Yeah.
its operating system and boot it from floppies.
Yeah, it's laughable how bad it is at this point. I mean, Zebra were terrible. I mean, truly
They
terrible, and we still couldn't get an inch on them.
Mm.
You know.
Well, at least the backs got to run around a bit.
Yeah,
It was nice.
yeah.
Nice
Some of
to
the
see.
stuff was nice. I mean, Kirshner played well. As you said, the
Yes.
lads you mentioned played well. I thought Kyle Marsh played well, actually.
And he's been re-signed. We
Yeah,
noticed today.
yeah. So he's not going up to Ulster,
No,
not joining the great
apparently
exodus.
not. No, there's still a couple of back rowers left that might.
Yeah,
make
there was
the-
some good news today, John. There was 17 guys re-signed, including
Dun dun dun.
Robbie Henshaw.
Yay! Yeah. Well,
The worst kept secret in Ireland.
we did say at the time when, you know, at all of the times when it's been mentioned, it's supposed to have been a done deal about 6 months ago, that it is a pity for Connacht. Yeah, if he's going anywhere, I'll have him here, thanks.
Yeah,
But
but like it's got to come down to the player, I presume.
I would have loved, I said it at the time, I would have loved to see Madigan go to Connacht, play with Henshaw and Marmion. Like, Jesus, that 10,
Well, I mean,
9, 10, 12
in the
combination.
stuff that came out that came out today and yesterday, Nusafora was pretty obvious, pretty blatant about stating he did everything in his power to stop it
Stop
happening,
him,
Yeah.
yeah.
and then hung the guy out to dry.
You kind of, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the guy's got to spend. Well, I mean, he has to spend 3 months there now,
Yeah,
right? And they've Nusafora hung him out to dry.
yeah.
You know, he said he wanted to leave. He couldn't wait to get out of there. I did everything in my power because
Yeah.
I'm lovely. And I hate Leinster, but I did everything. And Robbie Henshaw left you because he hates you all and he's spat in their grannies. I mean, the guy's a fucking idiot.
Ah, come on. You didn't quite say that now, Dave. But anyway,
He hung him out to dry for the rest of the season.
He did say that a bit. Yeah, he did. He probably should have kept his trap shut to that degree.
Yeah,
but
I mean, like, the same thing would happen. Like, you get some people up on their high horse about Mike McCarthy. You know, Mike McCarthy's Leinster raiding it. Like, Mike McCarthy's agent approached Leinster.
yeah,
That's how it worked. It didn't go the other way around.
These things work in a certain way, but you didn't see Eddie Wigglesworth say anything about it, did you? You know.
no, but he's gone now.
No, but he was the guy in charge at the time.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah.
The cobwebs were still around his office.
Like, I think it's great to see Robbie Henshaw come. You know, stick him there between Gary Ringrose and Johnny Sexton. That's pretty sexy. You know, we needed some good news. Let's face it. It hasn't been all good news, and I reckon there could be a signing or two left there.
It was interesting to note that the papers reported Nassi was re-signing as long term.
Yeah.
Now, what that means, I don't know, but that was the phrase that
Might mean he's going to play another year and then he'll coach.
that our two major papers used was the phrase long term. So that's interesting.
Like the guy is 34
Yeah.
next summer, so
Irish underage rugby tweeted us asking the question about rumours regarding IRFU moving a Leinster back row to Ulster, and there's a lot of rumours about
several of them.
but there's the rumours are all about every week it's a different guy.
Yeah, it's Geordie Murphy. It's Jack Conan currently.
Jack Cronin,
It was
Dominic
Dominic
Ryan
Ryan a couple of weeks ago.
well, he was going up there to play with Victor Vito and Luke Romano, so I don't think that'll be happening.
No,
I don't know who they're going to move. I don't know who's going to move.
or if anyone does. Listen,
They were taking Cathal Marsh as well, and he's re-signed. So
this thing about the IRFU are just ganging up to weaken Leinster and yada yada, and they're asking fellas to move and all. I think it's a bit hysterical, really. I mean, at the end of the day, it's always up to the player. Yes, the IRFU can say, "Well, look, we'd really like you to move to Ulster, and it might be better for your Ireland chances." But at the end of the day, it's the player the player can either go, "Well, I'd rather stay at Leinster if they'll have me," or I'm going to fucking Bordeaux or wherever.
But you can see
else.
it's working the other way. Like, for instance, Bernard Jackman was encouraged to move out of Connacht in order to progress his career, his international career.
Well, he was also encouraged to move there in the first place to help
his international career,
because he'd had four guys. They'd Shane Byrne, they'd Rory Best, Frankie Sheen, maybe, and whatever way it was at the time. So, it's not like there's a big chessboard and David Nucifora is there with his thing pushing guys around the board and going, "You stand over there, chap, and you go
can
there."
Australians play chess?
Whatever.
Checkers.
But
Yeah. Maybe a bit complicated for Ludo. It's even got the right colours.
I think it's a little
Red,
bit
blue, green and saffron.
I think it's a little bit simplistic to be thinking that this is all a big
That's where he went
conspiracy
wrong.
against
because
Leinster.
in Ludo, green it might be Connacht, but it's actually the Leinster provincial Connacht colours. That's where he went wrong.
You're taking this metaphor to
The nth
lengths
degree.
that it doesn't need to be taken. You're straining it down.
There is a certain amount of redistribution that is required. I mean, for just to use a horticultural term, to prune back, to encourage fresh growth, because you can have situations where, like, to a certain extent, we're talking about Ulster getting a Leinster back row. There are an awful lot of back rows at Leinster. There are too many back rows at Leinster. Now, there are ones that you want to keep, and there are ones you don't mind leaving. But you can't always manage it to that micro a degree.
There should be more, like, say, Sam Arnold moving down to Munster.
Munster,
Like, that was a perfect move.
Yeah.
Munster aren't, the most creative. Don't have a more creative set of backs. The ones that they do have, they let go to Northampton. So move guys down when there's an abundance of them up in Ulster. And similarly, like, if we're producing...
Well, if we're robbing Robbie Henshaw, maybe one of the Ulster centres might go, might be a bit of a merry-go-round there,
Well, I wonder if there's any quid pro quo for Robbie coming to Dublin.
Well, they might be just allowed get a few more quid and sign, Well, having said that, if it's Henshaw's decision, how can there be a quid pro quo?
Yeah.
His decision was the way it was. He's on a central contract and he wanted to come to Leinster, and that's been in the water for a while. The big question is anyone else coming in? I still think we signed Ian Nagel, which is a lot less exciting than it would have been 4 years ago or 5 years ago
when he got his man of the match.
Everyone was
against
going
Australia.
on about when he played really well in the friendly. But ultimately that's what happened. Since then, he's done nothing.
He's been injured a lot, is what he's done, and then he's taken 2 years off. Anyway,
No, but that, I mean,
he's a good big lad, and he'll add to our depth in the second row, and he could
I
turn
still
out
think-
to be
I-
great,
I
and
still
he
think-
could turn
well,
out to be
see, that's the thing,
mediocre.
He could turn out to be brilliant, but we still need a second row. We don't. I mean, Could
Exactly.
won't win us a Heineken Cup.
The significant thing is
Start to last season, John. You know, we had an Australian international who then
That's
obviously
true.
left
Yeah.
and went on and played in the World Cup.
Now we've got
final.
a lad who's back from backpacking.
well, I think he was in
An
business
MBA,
school.
Yeah,
an
well.
MBA
Anyway.
in Cambridge.
We have we have a decent bit of second row, although a lot of them didn't re-sign yet. God knows what's happening with Triggs. He's probably moving on. We haven't seen Mick Carney play yet. He's supposed to be great. Haven't seen him in a blue jersey yet. We might be seeing him quite soon. But the significant thing is neither of the two older scrum halves re-signed, at least today. Now,
Are they both on central deals though? Are they?
neither of them are now. So my theory would be that Redden is probably going to get another year somewhere.
Can we
with
get
us.
Marmion as well?
Well, apparently James Hart has gone somewhere.
He's gone to Racing.
Yeah, he's another guy that everybody gets excited about a lot.
This guy from Grenoble.
Yeah,
Yeah. Leinster guy as well, young Leinster guy. But we could get Cooney back from Connacht, for example. Be a handy one. I really think Luke McGrath has come on
Took
really
a nice
well.
try there at the weekend.
I don't think we need. I don't think we need any guys at that level. We need guys.
We need another year out of Redden.
Yeah, we need
And that's-
either another year at a Redden or somebody on that profile
Yeah.
profile. We don't need a young guy because we have two very fine young scrum halves.
Lad in Manchester, isn't it?
Huh?
Lad in Manchester.
I would have no objection to him coming in once he admitted he cheated. That's all he has to do. All he has to do is get up and press conference in front of the table and admit he cheated to get David Howell sent off. And then he's more than well.
Talk about
I
Howell,
shake
mate.
his hand and welcome him in.
What about Tana Umanga?
No, there's a
and-
lesson to you. Don't annoy me because I do hold grudges, right?
Well,
And I always get my revenge.
So there was a couple of other matches at the weekend. Connacht got off to a good start. They on Thursday night they beat the Dragons, got their
bonus point
win
away. Yeah.
So that moved
Great
them
result.
briefly up to the
Had
top.
to watch that one on CFAX as well.
Yeah.
Moved them briefly up to the top of the table. Then Ulster beat Glasgow to push them into the lead,
Yeah.
and then Munster were beaten at home
By the
by the
Ospreys.
Ospreys.
Which kind of brings the Ospreys a little bit back into it, and it also reinforces that Glasgow have 2 games more than both Ospreys and Munster, and also Edinburgh, who are the 3 teams ahead of them. It's a bit of a charge from Glasgow,
One
certainly.
against us though.
One against us, yeah. But it's over there, probably in Rugby Park in Kilmarnock by this stage. But I think a bit of a charge from Glasgow and Ospreys. I'm not saying they're going.
Kilmarnock's nearly Portmarnock. It could well be a home game for us.
I don't think they're going to necessarily get into the top 4, but they
Well,
definitely should get into the top
Glasgow
6.
take on Munster
Yeah.
at the weekend.
That's a
in
pivotal
Glasgow.
game. That's a pivotal game for both teams.
And it's 7.
Well, I don't think it's in Glasgow.
it is in Glasgow. Yeah?
No, I think it's in Kilmarnock. I don't think.
Well, sorry,
I don't,
it's in
oh,
Scotland.
yeah. I don't think they'll be playing at home. I mean,
For a while, yeah.
For a while, I don't think. From what people are saying, I don't think they'll be playing at home again this season.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah,
They're going
the-
to do a 4G or a 3G.
Well, that was
or
the thing. I
something.
mean, we were very happy when they moved to Scottstown, and it seemed like a very good move. But they have to.
However-
It has to be available for them, you know.
You wonder if they could put some sort of G4 or
That's
4G
what they're
That's what
talking-
they're
they're
trying to
talking
get, they're
about,
trying to
yeah.
get the local council to agree to it. The problem is that's not athletics friendly.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we shall see, but I think ourselves and Ulster are looking like we're going to duke it out somewhere up the top.
Yeah, well,
I think
just go back
Scarlets
to the
could easily be
just go
cut.
back to the Glasgow match. Like the Glasgow,
Maybe not easily.
Glasgow are 7 points behind Munster.
Yeah.
So there is a gap actually starting to open between the 6th place team, which is Munster, and the 8th place, which is Glasgow. And particularly if there's a win for Munster this weekend, I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but if it does happen, that gap can be extenuated.
Munster are starting to slide a bit now, and this game is very significant for them.
It's a must-win
If
now.
it is a must win, and if they win, it'll be very significant because it'll give Glasgow right kicking, and it'll take the edge off their ambitions, but it'll also solidify Munster's position in
The one thing I would say is I wouldn't read too much
in
into
Europe.
Munster losing to Ospreys.
No.
Because Ospreys are really good at beating Irish teams in Ireland. I mean,
Yeah.
they are really good at it.
there.
And it was a close run thing.
But how many seasons have you seen Ospreys having a horrendous run of games towards the end of the season and winning them all?
Oh yeah.
They're perfect at doing
They're very
it.
good at it. They're very good at it.
So they could make a charge. I think they could possibly get in ahead of the Scarlets. Like they're 10 points behind, I think, and they've a better run of fixtures.
Scarlets are doing a bit of a Glenn Hansard on it. They're falling slowly, but they are falling.
Yeah.
You know, it's taken them a long time to because a bit of a gap broke up. It's taken a long time for them to fall out of the top four.
They've signed a tight head from Super Rugby, I think, temporarily till the end of the season.
Yeah, they have.
And they've got a new South African second row, I think, as well. So they're shoring up their deficiencies in the tight five. So they might stay.
The one thing I would say for Munster is that a lot of the guys who mightn't have been that highly rated at the beginning of the season, for example, like Scanlon and like Ronan O'Mahony, actually are playing really well at the moment.
Yeah.
I thought they were the two standout players last Sunday.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a bonus for them if they're getting two guys. If you like bringing two guys out of the academy or coming straight into the team and actually looking the part, those are freebies for them, you know. So by the end of the season, they could be important players for them.
Well, as you mentioned, John, the Scarlets, but they play Ulster in Ravenhill, so it's first against fourth. There's only 1 point between the two teams, but, so that's going to be a tough assignment for them up there in Belfast.
It is. I can't see them winning in Belfast. Ulster haven't lost at home this season. Neither have we. So let's see if we can. You know, that's a bit of a pointer, really. You know, to see. Now Ulster couldn't win away in the early part of the season, but they didn't lose at home, and I don't see that changing this weekend. You never know, of course, but Scarlets are likely, like, it's good for us because we're in between the two of them, and if even if Ulster win, it's good for us because it knocks the Scarlets a bit out of the
either one, like, will knock to the right.
Yeah. And the same with Munster and Glasgow. It's good for the teams around them because they're going to take points off each other. In fact, isn't there a third one? Isn't there Edinburgh are away to the Ospreys, I think. So there's another top 8 teams playing against each other. There's 3. It's rare enough that 3 top 8 matches, 6 of the top 8 are playing against each other. So opportunities to take points, like that's a mid-table one as well, Edinburgh and Ospreys. If Ospreys get in a bit of a charge, you never know what might happen. We have to go to Cardiff, of course.
Cardiff suffered a defeat to Treviso.
Yeah.
Treviso's first win of the entire season.
51 weeks. That is the last time. 51 weeks ago. And guess who they beat 51
Cardiff.
weeks ago?
Is it?
Cardiff.
Oh, the boys. The Blues.
So Cardiff don't like going to Treviso. Everyone else does, including Zebre, but Cardiff do not like it. Whether they bounce back against us, Jesus knows they've got all their players bar Warburton and getting Jenkins back.
They've got the bench warmers back, the Welsh bench warmers.
That's nearly all of their players.
Yeah.
Is Cuthbert back?
No.
Yeah, he is.
Is
Yeah,
he? Is
Cuthbert is
Cuthbert?
back.
Cuthbert.
Gareth Anscombe is back.
Yeah.
They've like 7 players
Josh
back.
Turnbull.
Was he
that's
even
what
there?
yeah.
Was he?
How many players will we get back, I wonder?
It
You've
depends.
got
It depends on how panicked Joe is. In the state of maniac depression that Irish rugby is in.
well.
I'd say we'll get a couple of the.
Anybody who needs game time, we're going to get guys like Redden. We're going to get.
He already
Madigan,
said we'll have Ross and Healy, or
gonna
strongly intimated that we'll have them.
We might have them on the bench if they're training with Ireland. So Madigan, Redden, Ross,
You
Healy.
can keep that.
What do you mean you can keep Madigan? You don't want them back?
Actually, I think I no, that's not fair. That's an unfair comment. I would welcome him back. Actually,
Bloody
but
right.
I wouldn't play him without half.
Well, whatever you do with him,
I would have
I
him
want
back.
him in the team. There's a few other lads we'll probably get back. We're not going to get the likes, obviously, of Mike McCarthy or Devin Toner or anyone who started it.
Funnily enough, for a position that we're actually weak in, we're strong enough there. With Triggs and Ross Maloney, I'm happy with that. With that
Tom
as a
Denton on the
combination.
bench.
Tom Denton on the bench. I'm happy with that. I mean, I'd much rather have obviously Devin Toner and Mike McCarthy because they're the standard they're at. But if we're not going to have them, we're okay.
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard, but I wonder will what's his name get Mick Carney get a go off the bench?
Well. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah,
He's very close up to returning. So, returning. He hasn't played a bloody game for us yet.
Yeah.
He's very close to
returning to rugby.
playing his first game for Leinster, which would be good to see. It'd be very timely. And Jack Conan, I think, isn't too far away either.
No,
So there's a couple of guys we might.
We'll
have
probably
a
get
strong enough
we'll get
team.
Jordy Murphy back, or we'll have Jordy
Yeah.
Murphy again rather. Might get Van der Fleer back,
I would say we'd have
Yeah.
Van der Fleer.
McFadden possibly.
Yeah, I'd say we'll have quite a few guys back, but we have quite a few guys missing. So
Mm.
we won't be seeing the like of Rob Kearney, Dave
Oh,
Kearney, Johnny
I
Sexton.
don't expect to see any of the.
Anybody who
starters.
starts.
No, I don't expect to see any of those. But that still leaves us in a strong enough position in terms of backs. We still have Issa, we have Kirshner who's playing well. Adam Byrne, who had another good game, I thought.
Yeah.
You can actually see that guy progress, which is encouraging. We still have Teo, we still have Ringrose, we'd have Madigan back, as you say. With Cathal Marsh, another game under his belt. We'd have Luke McGrath. These are players that are not to be sneezed at. These are significant players, I think.
There's a lot of backs there you mentioned, Dave. I think we're a bit shy in the pack, are we?
Well, I'm not sure about that. We'll have Keane Healy and Mike Ross, we'll say, as starters. We might get Furlong back.
Might do,
he's been
yeah,
a run out
yeah.
because he's
We
been
get
on the
Cronin
bench.
and Strauss.
Well, we'll have two from,
we'll
I'd say,
definitely-
Conan, Strauss and Tracy, and I'd be happy with that any day
Yeah.
of the week. And
Yeah.
we discussed the second row, we've discussed the back row, so
Well, yeah, we'll have Dominic Ryan, Jordy Murphy. We'll
probably Van der Fleer,
have
Dan Levy.
Van der Fleer, we have Levy. There's a couple of there's plenty of options there in the back row. So if we get Redden back and you get Madigan back, that's the half back sorted. So I think there's plenty there for a
Yeah.
good team to go to Cardiff.
Plenty for a strong team, anyway.
If they get the mindset right,
Mhm.
they'll tear Cardiff out of it. If they don't, though, we're vulnerable.
Well, we've beaten them already this season in the RDS.
Yeah, but we generally do beat them in the RDS.
We beat
and
them in Cardiff as well last season.
Yeah, I think we did the season before as well. But I don't know what it is. I know it's been 6
Yeah,
years, but I have a feeling Cardiff are going to get it together. They kind of
I
have.
have a fear that
few
guys
times.
will be 95% focused on the match.
Yeah.
And that's not enough. Because that 5% where they're thinking about Twickenham is the bit that worries me. It won't be it'll be a subconscious thing because obviously they'll all consciously be trying to do their best for Leinster. I mean, I've no doubt about that. But the fear, because if Cardiff are the kind of team, if they do get a run on, they do get on top of the ground. They're the kind of team that can play an expensive game.
Yeah, for sure.
So
They just
and-
haven't been
and-
playing it all season.
no, they haven't. But they haven't.
It just must be so frustrating to be a Cardiff supporter.
I think I've met we did a thing when we played them in the quarter final in the European Cup. We did a meet and greet with their supporters club, and they're lovely people. They really are, and they really passionate about their team.
Haven't had a lot to be passionate about
But
since 2009.
They haven't had an awful. They've been let down time and
Or
time
10.
again on the pitch by that team, and that's got to be disappointing for them. It must be. I mean, it's easy for us. I mean, the worst. Our season last year was terrible. We only got to the semi-final of the European Cup, or the year before our season was terrible, or the year before when we won Camden, or the year before.
I know.
All those bad years we've had. It's easy for us.
They were the good
You
years,
know?
Dave.
And, no, but it's easy for us because even on our worst day, we still have something to look forward to.
Well,
You wonder about Cardiff. I mean, they're barely above Dragons. Are they above Dragons?
yeah, they are.
Just
yeah.
about, though.
No, they're
I
just
don't
behind
know.
Glasgow. If they'd have won that game in Treviso, they would have been very close to Glasgow.
Are they? I think that they're fourth from bottom.
Yeah, well, that would be right.
They're ninth.
Yeah,
That would
And I
be
don't
right.
think it's a big-
Glasgow are 8th.
I don't think there's a big difference between them and Dragons.
No.
And I think for a club that like Cardiff, capital city club, I think
Also,
the
a
problem,
club that has so much history,
yeah,
going
to
back
be
into the
to
50s
be
and 70s.
duking it out with Dragons down the bottom and Zebre
Well, I
is not a great
tell you
position
now,
for
a lot of their supporters will just tell you that since 2009, Roger Lewis has been trying to kill the Regents. That's their take on it, that he's financially trying to weaken them ever since. You'll notice that none of them have had Galacticos ever since, and so there's a certain truth in that the Regents have been weakened over since 2009. I mean, look at the players, look at the roster, look at that Cardiff team that won the Amlin.
Look at the Cardiff team. There was 4 or 5 lines,
Mhm.
like starting lines, on that team.
a couple of All Blacks as well.
No, but even a couple of
the
years, two
recent
seasons ago,
team, yeah.
Yeah.
they just don't perform for their club. Like, if they can blame anyone they want, the fans can blame whoever they want. But if they're looking outside the club, they should really start looking at the players rather than
We've seen
guy
Cardiff
in an
teams-
office in the Millennium Stadium.
We've seen guys come to teams come to the RDS Cardiff teams with really strong players, with actual genuine superstars of rugby, and they haven't
Getting
tried
hockeyed.
a leg.
Yeah.
Sure, we've seen it. I remember about 2 seasons ago. It was just after the Lions. They had Warburton, Roberts, They had the winger, Cuthbert.
Cuthbert,
They did one other guy. I can't remember who the other one was.
They're all lines anyway.
Anyway, 4 lines were starting in the.
And they were hockeyed.
30 points down after half an hour, as I recall.
Jenkins, Jenkins.
Yeah.
Mm.
Ripped apart. Yeah.
Poor old Gethin Jenkins is kind of shot. He's still okay around the
Yeah,
park,
but this was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and he started in the lines. So,
well, he's still starting for his country, or at least coming on off the bench for his country.
The problem with Cardiff has never been the talent available to it. It's how often the talent makes itself available.
Yeah, well, hopefully this weekend will not be one of those times.
yeah.
Well, we see. I think Leinster will have a strong team out, and I think we'll do well.
Well, that's the thing. Just to go back to that point, like if you look at even last week, I'm sure very difficult for say someone like Jordy Murphy to motivate himself. When the national team is in France, this time 2 years ago, he was over in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the World Cup, and he's playing now in front of half
Very
empty.
it was 8,000. It's one of the lower attendances I can remember in recent
on
years.
a kind of a drizzly, damp night. Small crowd. The international team. It wasn't very, but he didn't. He stood up and he had a good game. He scored a try. You wouldn't see too many fellas in his position from Cardiff doing the same.
No. In fairness, that's actually a very good point. The guys who had, if you like, fallen from to a certain extent, fallen from prominence, really did play very well for us on Friday night.
And then
it is. But all they can do is the
But
best.
for years we used to play the All Blacks in Australia and England and suffer 50-point defeats, and everyone would just say about the All Blacks, God, they're ruthless. Not about how crap we were, but how ruthless they were. And that's what Leinster showed last weekend.
Yeah.
That they were ruthless.
Oh, they didn't give a sucker an even break, in fairness. When they had with the exception of them all.
Yeah.
But when they had their foot on the Zebre throat, it did not come off.
But you can, it was 26 apiece in each half. Do you know what I mean? So it's a consistency of performance. Get your
It certainly is.
4 tries, try every 10 minutes sort of thing.
Pity they don't give you an extra bonus point for 4 tries in the second half.
Well, I mean,
I'm just going to develop my point that you have a lot of young kids coming through.
Like where I was going.
Sorry, yeah. You mentioned a few of them there. There was Adam Byrne, Kelleher, Ringrose again continues on his meteoric rise, and there was a good few others as well that are starting to come through. But those guys, again, contrasting them to Cardiff, those guys are trying to play for their club to make it back to the glory days of just at the over the last say 5 years ago when we were winning Heineken Cups. Cardiff have more history probably than Leinster do, but you don't see the kids coming through on the Cardiff team saying, I'm going to be motivated in this game to try and elevate Cardiff back up the table and back to being the best team in Britain and in Europe.
Well, that's what I was going to say was that one of the more heartening things about it was the guys who played really, really well are the guys we're going to be watching for hopefully the next 10 years. And whatever there has there has been talk that maybe the attitude in the dressing room, the culture in the dressing room isn't as strong as it has been in the past. One or two guys have said that, but whatever about that, and I can't argue with that. You couldn't see it. You didn't see it on the pitch on Friday night. You saw those guys were the real kind of the likes of Peter Dooley. I thought was
well, I mean, they showed it against Bath in Europe, and like last season, the Six Nations period, I think in particular, was criticised by a few players and ex-players as the attitude not being right, and that's where we lost a lot of momentum was during the Six Nations last year, and it's usually where we gained momentum.
Well, the
hopefully,
previous season we took 19 out of 20 points, and last year we took what?
Half that.
It was a low level.
We lost to the Dragons.
Something
like that. So hopefully this Six Nations we can, the way the team are looking, you'd hope that they could keep the pressure on during the Six Nations because the younger guys seem to be trying a leg this year, where they perhaps weren't as much last year.
I was very heartened by, like I said, Adam Byrne is a guy who's been on people's radar for a long time because he started so young. But you can see a real development in him.
Yeah.
He looks. I mean, his handoff for his try and the power he showed for his try, I thought was excellent.
That was a great finish. Yeah,
it was really, really good finish. Keane Keller had pace and he ran well, but in the end, all he had to do was run a straight line.
But it was a little bit of a jink there. Now, come on.
He did it well. I thought Luke McGrath was excellent. I thought Ringrose, what was it, 2 assists and a try?
Mm-hmm.
That's nice finishing, and it's nice to see the guys who you're hoping, you sign guys like Easton Asiwa and Zane Kirshner to be the backbone during this period. And in fairness, they were universally excellent. Those 2 guys were absolutely superb. They were really good.
And Issa was kicking the points as well until he went off.
They were really, really good. Now you couldn't praise the 2 of them highly enough.
Very good. Okay, lads, thanks very much. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers.